Good morning. This is Dennis. Yeah, I think it's good now to start with the meeting. Probably other people will join us in a couple of minutes, but yeah, because it's almost already past 10:30, I will start with this webinar. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Dennis. I'm an Office 365 consultant at Ultima. And today I'm hopefully going to show you how you can use the power of Power Automate product in Office 365 to basically automate end-to-end processes. For this exercise today, I've prepared 3 use cases. And these use cases are an automated flow where I'm basically going to show you how you could start with a new starter process. And I've basically created 2 versions of that, a simple one and a more advanced one. The second use case is nowadays a lot of news around Office 365 is being shared. And I'm basically have a use case where I'm grabbing this information and share it amongst IT team. So it's SharePoint related news, which is going to be shared amongst an IT team. And the third use case I'm going to demonstrate today is a sign-off approval process. So the sign-off of, for instance, proposal documents. That's the third use case I'm going to demo. So hopefully you like it, but it's heavy on the demoing side of it. So this is probably the only slide I'm going to show you guys. So I will switch to my demo environment. So today I'm demoing this on a demo environment with an E5 license, to be clear. And what you're looking at right now is a SharePoint intranet. And on this SharePoint intranet, I've basically configured a couple of use cases. And one of the first ones is the new starter process. And just to see what the end result is, I will first demonstrate it, and then afterwards I will show the in-depth flow, and I will explain all the different actions of that flow. So on this intranet, an end user, or in this case probably a manager, can request or can start a process for a new starter, and they can do that by clicking on this button on, for instance, an intranet landing page. And when that manager goes to the page, and obviously this can be security trimmed, that only managers can access this form. They can add the name of the new starter. So for instance, in this case, this can be Stuart Doe. And then they can select a department where the new starter will be starting. And then the manager can also provide, for instance, the date of when the person is going to start. So in this case, the 1st of August. And then they can submit this request. And what happens in the background is that this first flow will basically create the tasks for the supporting IT staff, so they can see they are expected to create an account in the future. So in this flow, I should be clear that it's not creating the account yet, but it's only creating a task and organizing the work for the IT staff. So in this case, this will create a message within the channel, and over here you can see that there's a message where it says when it has been submitted, and that message also links to a planner task. So in this case, it's also related to a planner plan. So when the IT team sees this new task, they can click on this link, and then they should see a new task for this new starter. So in this case, you see a new starter, Stuart Doe, with all the related information for the IT staff to actually execute this task. So again, this is not an end-to-end process, not fully automated, but this is only the handling the request and creating a task for that. So what happens in the background? This is all being done by a Power Automated flow. And for the people who aren't familiar with flows, a flow is basically a set of actions where you can either trigger it, you can schedule it. There are a lot of things which you can do with a flow. And if you want to, in this case, the flow I've created for this process is stored in a solution. And it's a bit slow today, sorry about that. When it loads, then I can show you the different steps which are being executed in the background. So in this case, I created a separate webinar solution, which is, by the way, in a different environment. And like you saw, the input is from a Microsoft form. So basically, that's the trigger to start this flow. So in the design or in the configuration of the flow, you will see that as the starting point of the flow. So here is my webinar solution, and that has the existing flow. So in this case, this is the actual flow, which is handling all the stuff you were seeing before. So the automated flow was being run like, I don't know, 3-4 minutes ago. And here in the history, this is a section where you can see the previous instances of the flow being ran. Here you can see the succeeded instance of the creation of the Stuart Doe test case. So when I click on it, you can actually see what happened in the background. So starting to look at this history, you see that the first action is when that specific request form, which I showed earlier, when it receives an input, a new submit request, then this flow will start. The next step is I need to get the details of that input, because obviously you saw it contains the name of the starter, start date from the starter, and also the department where the starter will going to start or will start a new job. So here in the output, you can see that it can capture all these kind of fields. So for instance, the questions and the corresponding honors can be found in here when you are grabbing the details of the response. After that, I'm setting a variable. I will explain later why this could be useful to set a variable. And then you can see the creation of the task. So in this case, I'm creating a task on a plan which is called IT Planning Board, and I'm setting it in a bucket. So in this case, we have different buckets. So you can have a to-do bucket on your planning board, but you can also have a new starters bucket, but you can also create your own custom buckets. So in this case, I'm creating these tasks in this bucket. And afterwards, in the next step, I'm updating some details. And then lastly, and that's what you saw in the chat of the channel, I'm creating a message as a flowbot, and I'm adding some details from that task in that message. So this is a succeeded flow instance. If you want to see the details of the flow itself and the configuration, then you can click on the edit button, and then you can start configuring. So in this case, this is the trigger, a new request form. And in here you can see that I'm referring to a form ID. So I've created this form earlier just via forms.microsoft.com. And this is basically a normal form creation tool. So here you can say, I want to have a name and a couple of questions. And when you're finished with creating that form, the flow should be able to identify this in this drop-down menu. So after that, I could just select it from this list. So that's the trigger. After this has been triggered, you need to grab the response. So again, you should select the same form ID, and then in here you're grabbing the response ID, and this is a dynamic content. So let's say, for argument's sake, this is empty. Then you can click on this, and then you get this prompt, and then you can basically look up that response ID. In this case, there aren't any other dynamic content values, so it's quite clear that it should only be this attribute or this field. But sometimes the list is a lot longer and you have a lot of dynamic content fields. So yeah, in this case, you'll always need the response ID. So just enter response ID. And then we have the start date, the variable. Again, I'm using this, or not again, I'm using this to basically troubleshoot. So yeah, in this case, I'm just setting it as a start so I can see what the actual value is from the form. But it can also be useful to do some manipulation. So for instance, if you have an SLA, a service level agreement, where yeah, the starter, the account creation for the starter has to be done 7 days before, then you can use the same variable to add a calculation to it. So deduct, for instance, 7 days from it. So in that sense, you can, yeah, get the start date, move it a bit further or a bit earlier to create it. So that also could be useful to use a variable. And then in this action, I'm basically linking to the group because the plan is always connected to an Office 365 group, a specific plan, which in this case is the IT planning board. The title, which is, yeah, a random string or a random string with partly dynamic content. So in this case, I'm specifying a new starter and then the name of the starter, which basically is the output of the form response. And then over here, I'm specifying the bucket. So again, if you have your own custom bucket, then you can also just select that. I'm using the start date as a due date. So over here, you can also use that manipulation and using an expression. One of my tips would be to have a look at the add days expression. So by using the add days expression, you can basically either add or deduct days. So I would definitely recommend using this feature or this expression to manipulate the due date time if you want to, move the start date depending to your SLAs. So that's creating the task. After that, I'm also entering some details on the task itself. So it's not only the title I'm setting. Over here you can also see these notes. So basically that's being done in the update task details. So unfortunately Microsoft isn't allowing that in this action. Like you can see over here, you can only set a title and some basic properties. But if you want to set the notes, then you have to do an update task details. And again, in here you can see dynamic content reference. So this is the ID of the task details. So you should be able to find it whenever you click on the field and then go to the dynamic content. So if we just look for ID, again, you can see here the ID of the task. So that's the step of creating the planner tasks. And then the next step is actually grabbing that information and notifying the team about the new starter on a Microsoft Teams channel. This is an action where you can just configure the team where you want to provide this message. You can also specify channels. So again, if you want to have a different channel, then just select it over here. And then in the last section is the actual message. So in here, you can again use dynamic content to make your own custom message. So in my case, I'm just referring to the submission time, the due date when the IT staff is required to finish or create this starter account, and then also a link to the actual task, so they can still find that task and mark it as complete. For instance, if the IT manager is managing that board, for instance, to see if all the starter tasks are being completed. So yeah, this is a relatively simple way of automating or managing requests, and also showing you how you can basically track those activities on a planner board, and lastly how you can also notify people via Teams instead of email. But obviously, for the people who aren't familiar with this product, you can use obviously other actions to notify people. So other options which you could use in this flow would be just sending an email, maybe sending a message. I don't know if that's a good idea, obviously, but yeah, it's possible. If you have other products, or if you're using case management tools or ServiceNow or something like that, yeah, you can obviously also create a ServiceNow case. If you have a third-party tool where there's not a default connector, you can always have a look at sending an HTTP request if it has a REST API or other kind of API and endpoint where you can integrate with. So there are definitely some options out there. So yeah, this is the first version. What I also did is I created a more advanced version. So basically the start point of that flow is similar. So yeah, again, people can just enter information in this form, and for the clarity, I will use another name. So I'll say in this case it's Tim Doe. And that person starts in September. And with this second more advanced flow, I'm actually a bit more of a lazy admin. So I'm actually also automating the creation of the account. So in this case, after this form is submitted, the request is going to be shown on again on the Microsoft Teams channel, but in this case it's the request, the details of the request are being shown on an adaptive card, which is basically kind of an actionable message in Microsoft Teams. And the benefit of this is that an IT person can basically already do something or trigger something else. So in this case, this is start a creation form. The IT person can manipulate some of the values. The IT person can also, for instance, select which security groups they want to add this new starter to. And again, for demo's sake, I only added 2 security groups, but this could also potentially be something you dynamically collect from your Active Directory or your Azure Active Directory. And then if the IT person is happy, then they can start the process of creating that account. So when they click on it, this request is actually handled and the flow will continue, and actually the Azure AD account gets created. So this is more of an advanced kind of flow from the configuration point of view. Obviously for an end user, it's not that different or not that complicated compared to the first version. So in that second version, I'm actually using adaptive cards action and also create Azure AD user. Let me switch to my right environment. So again, it's an automated flow, so it's still triggered, and it's basically reusing the same actions like you saw before. But only now in this case, it's instead of just posting a message on Teams, it's posting an adaptive card, and it's a pretty new type of action. So adaptive cards, as a concept, it's a set of actions and controls which basically should be able to adapt to the different products. So adaptive cards could also be used in different products of Microsoft, but it's something which is definitely usable in this kind of scenarios. So in this case, you can see the same trigger, the same response ID. I'm setting some other variables like random string, which basically is to generate the password. So in this case, I'm using the substring of a GUID. So basically I'm generating a random GUID, grabbing 8 characters from that and putting some text around it. Probably this text around it, you can also do that in some other way, but for now, for the demo's sake, it was easier to generate a password. Started you saw before. I'm also using variables for mail nickname and UPN. So basically, whenever you create an Active Directory or Azure AD account, you need to set a couple of required fields. So in this case, a mail nickname and UPN are required, only they require a certain naming convention. So that's why I'm initializing the variables, so later on I can apply that naming convention. The planning board and description are still the same. And then the harder bit or the tricky part is the actual adaptive cards. I can share with you guys later if you want, but Microsoft has a great resource on how you can construct adaptive cards. So basically, if you just look for adaptive cards in Microsoft Docs, you should be able to find it. But yeah, in here you can find a lot of documents on how you could create these kind of cards. But basically, an adaptive card, sorry, this is the correct flow. Adaptive card is just one big JSON file. So in here you see the schema, and then here you see things like text blocks, input text fields, and last one, for instance, the choice set. So that all corresponds with what you're seeing here. Like this is input text, this is text block, this is a choice set. So basically that's all defined in here. And what I'm doing with this adaptive card is that I'm already pre-populating it with data from my form. So basically that the IT staff member only needs to validate it, because there's no pointing on re-entering if it's already correct. So in this case, you can see that the full name, the value of the full name is actually the what's the name field of the original form. So this is the whole markup for the adaptive card to JSON. I can share that later on if you want. And then I'm using the post an adaptive card to Teams channel and wait for a response action. That's a long name for action, by the way. To post that adaptive card. So basically, this is again the team. This is a new channel. And this is basically this same card which I already composed, and I put that in this message. And what you also can do with adaptive cards is you can update it after somebody clicked on the submit button or on an action button, and then you can provide them back with some message. In this case, I'm just giving back a thank you. So whenever somebody clicks on this button, after that they will see this. So the rest of the IT staff can see, it's already been handled. But this thank you is, it's pretty, it's not a lot of information. So you obviously can use dynamic content to provide this update message with some more details. So for instance, thank you. You've just, for instance, the name of the starter, the starter, the new starter creation for this starter has been handled, or something like that. So definitely make use of this update message. And then, like I said, I had a couple of variables because I needed to do some converting on the create a account user scenario. So in this case, I'm using a replace function to basically remove white space. So obviously, when somebody enters a full name of a person, they will have the first name space last name. That's a normal way of entering a name of somebody in a form. But for a male nickname, a space is not allowed. So basically, I'm trimming that white space by using this expression. So this replace function is a really useful function for that expression. And normally, and that's that's maybe a tip, if you're not familiar with this kind of functions, if you enter it, you will basically get some kind of IntelliSense. So when you click on this and you enter this, you get some IntelliSense of this. So in here, it explains you first need to add text, which is of type string. Then you need to enter then you have a comma separator. Then you need to enter the alt text, and again a comma separator, and then you need to add the new text as a string. So to show this again, this is the string which I'm basically looking at. So again, that's the full name. one of the downsides, by the way, is normally you would see a name of the attribute in here, but with forms, they basically only generate an ID. That's why you see the R26 instead of full name. And then this is the alt text, and the alt text is a space. That's why you see a quote, space, quote. And then the new text is quote, quote without a space. So basically that's a way of replacing a white space within a full name. And then my next variable is setting the UPN, and basically I'm just using the earlier created mail nickname without a space, and then entering a domain name after it. There's probably also a nicer way to do this, or maybe if you look at the user created object, there probably is already an attribute which has this value. So potentially this is not needed, but yeah, for now, for the demo, it was useful to do it like this and also show you how you can basically just add some text or characters to an existing variable. And then the next step is obviously creating the account. To be clear, I'm only creating an account which isn't enabled yet, because yeah, if you're creating it before, then probably you want to enable it on the day they are starting. And also, I'm not adding the starter to the group, which you could select in the drop-down list of the adaptive cards. So potentially that's also nice to have in this flow. So there could be the next step kind of thing to add to this flow. But yeah, in here I'm creating a user with no. I'm using a display name, and that's basically what was directly from the form. I'm using a mail nickname, which obviously is trimmed with where the space is removed. Then I'm using a random string, which was the first expression, and then I'm using the principal name. There are more options which you could set, so also things like business phone, job title, all these kind of things. So again, I'm not asking this in the form, but yeah, potentially you could also set these if you add all those input fields to your form. So then yeah, could be a nice way of handling the new starter requests. So yeah, this was the first scenario, the new starter process. Hopefully that was clear. If there are some questions, obviously ask them, and I will try to answer them at the end of the session of this webinar. Otherwise, you can also reach out to us after the webinar. Hopefully this first scenario was clear. So I will now move on to the second scenario. The second scenario is all about how do you say that? Digesting all the updates from Microsoft, basically. That can be a real challenge nowadays. Like on a day-to-day basis, Microsoft is sharing new features about different products, and that sometimes can be a challenge for professionals. So what I basically did was I created a flow where on a daily basis that flow will check if there's any new related SharePoint news from the Microsoft SharePoint team. And if there is, then that news will be again either shared on a Microsoft Teams channel or in a SharePoint list. So just to show you guys, this is the channel. So in here you can see a Teams channel with 2 items. Unfortunately, Microsoft didn't have any SharePoint news yesterday, because they're not posting it on a daily basis. So probably the schedule to run this flow is probably better on a weekly basis instead of a daily basis. But yeah, these are news items from, I think, a week ago or something like that. But the flow will post this news, and it's basically an excerpt, so a summary, and then it will also post a link to the original article. So yeah, this could be quite useful for IT staff members to keep track of all the news related to SharePoint. And like you can see on the left-hand side, I actually also pinned this channel. So that could also be a nice, useful feature. And other options could be, to, for instance, mention certain people or start a conversation around this. Like, okay, I've read about this, and then you can maybe follow up on that. So this could be a nice way of sharing, not only sharing news, but also doing the next steps. So this is one part of the flow. It's posting this to this channel. And another part is I've actually created a SharePoint list. And I basically created this just to show you that you can also store this kind of information in a list, for instance. I don't know if for this scenario it's the best thing to do, because it's not very readable. And so personally, I was thinking about instead of creating it as SharePoint list items, maybe creating it as news posts like this. But I haven't figured that out, to be honest. So that's on my to-do list basically. But yeah, this that's the end-to-end that's this use case. Now to show you the flow itself, how this is being done. So like I mentioned, this is not the trigger for this flow is not some process or some form which gets submitted, but it's basically a schedule. So maybe like in the past, schedule tasks on servers. Basically, you can provide a date, a weekly date, a specific instance. You can basically just schedule it. So in this case, I'm scheduling it every. I think I did it every day. I'm not sure, to be honest. I need to check on my trigger settings itself. And yeah, after that, it's basically grabbing data from a RSS feed, and it's looking at that RSS feed if there are any new articles from, for instance, yesterday, and if that condition is being met, then it will post that new news article to either SharePoint and or Teams. So that's this flow, this scheduled flow, get Microsoft blogs. And again, you could reuse this this approach for pretty much every RSS feed, which is it's the same version of RSS. So having a look at this flow, I scheduled it to run every day at 6. So this is the trigger or basically the schedule. You can obviously change that. So in this case, it's one interval. You can also do that like a couple of times a day. So if it's, I don't know, if it's really important news of a BBC news site or something like that, then yeah, you can run that every hour or a couple of times an hour. So that's the frequency. And yeah, you can also even schedule it to run every second. I wouldn't recommend that, because then you have a lot of instances, and I can't think of any scenario where that's really needed, but yeah, it is possible, to be clear. And you can also schedule for different time zones or at specific minutes. So if one time a day is not specific enough, you can also say, yeah, in my case, at 6 o'clock or at 6:30 or 6:15 or whatever you want. So that's the schedule. And then again, I'm using a couple of variables. So this is publish date. This is just to set a variable and then later manipulate it. And then this is actually what I talked about in one of the earlier flows with the due date for the starter. Actually, this is the example I was referring to, just to show you the expression. Basically, here I'm grabbing today's date, so the 17th of June. I'm formatting it in a way I want to. So in this case, in a format I'm familiar with, or the system is familiar with. And I'm actually using an add days to go back in time. So in this case, it's going back to the 11th of June. So basically this compare date is the 11th of June. And that's a way of manipulating a date, for instance, if you want to use that. And then the next action is list all RSS feed items action. And yeah, this is quite interesting because I prepared the demo and I used some conditions to actually see if something changed in the past. But actually, this since field also does that. So in hindsight, this flow could be a bit simpler. But yeah, for argument's sake, and also just to show you how you could use conditions, I will continue. But yeah, if you guys if you want this solution, yeah, you can probably also just enter this compare date to here, because then it will only grab items since the 11th of June. That's what this since value means. So yeah, this is actually the RSS feed. So just to show you how that feed looks like, so you have an idea of what I'm actually grabbing, what kind of information. So it's basically an RSS feed where you have things like creator, the date, title, the link, description. So all kinds of useful information which you potentially could reuse in your sharing news feature. So yeah, that's connecting the feed. And then basically I'm using apply to each to go through all these items. And then for every item, I'm checking if the date of today is equal. If the published date is equal to the date I'm specifying. So in this case, I was running it every morning, and every morning I was looking at. So normally I wouldn't have this 16 because I was looking at yesterday. So normally I would look at, I was scheduled it every morning at 6, and at 6 I will look at if there were any new articles yesterday. So basically I'm posting the articles from yesterday, but obviously because Microsoft didn't have any articles yesterday, that's why I configured it 16 days back, because otherwise I wouldn't have any demo content to show you guys. So normally, yeah, it should only look compared to the published date, which is so for instance yesterday, and if it's meeting that condition that the published date is yesterday, then it will create or post a message to the news channel, and then it will also create a list item. So just to show you here, this is a post and message v3, and within this v3 you have the option to actually use HTML. So I'm actually doing that. So in here you can see a paragraph, and within the paragraph I'm posting a primary feed link, which is basically again just dynamic content. So in here you see the list all RSS feed items, and then you can look for the for the different fields. So in this case, it's a feed link. So yeah, you can just select that, and then it will be put in the HTML. And I'm also using substring function to actually only grab the first 300 characters of the article, because some tech community blog articles are quite extensive, so could be like over, I don't know, 2000 characters. So that's quite a lot to post in a news or in a Teams channel. So that's why I'm using that substring function to only grab the first 300 characters. So just to show you, this is the apply to each. So the field, the summary field, this is my starting point, start at the first character, and then this is the end point, the 300 characters. So after 300 characters, it basically will cut off and will not show everything which is after that character number 300. So that's posted in the news channel. And then I'm also posting it to a list in SharePoint. So it's just a list, a custom list with a couple of custom fields. So a title, a description, a pub date, and a blog link. The only special thing which I needed to do is this description field, which should be here. That only allows markup and not HTML. So that's the main reason why you're seeing this HTML to text conversion. So in here you see the same substring. So I'm grabbing again the 300 characters, but basically I'm stripping away the HTML by using this action. So yeah, that's the second second example. This is just, I think, a starting point for sharing information. Yeah, I think like with the first flow, potentially you could also make this a more actionable message kind of thing. So whenever there's a new SharePoint news item, you could also, for instance, post that on a planning board and then assign somebody to further examine it or something like that. So I think as a use case, you can probably also use other actions to make it more effective or more usable. But yeah, as a demo, I just wanted to show you guys how you could use, for instance, a condition where you can basically look at part of the input, compare it, and see if it's meeting that condition. And if that's true, then you can do something. Because yeah, you don't always want to post all the RSS feed items as messages to a Teams channel every single day. So that's why I wanted to show you this. So that's the second use case. The third use case, I think we still have 10 minutes, so hopefully I can still show you that. The third use case is all about signing off proposals. So again, my starting point is one of the tiles on the SharePoint side. So basically, yeah, there are a lot of cases or a lot of scenarios where people create documents. Yeah, again, a proposal is an example, but a high-level design, other type of documents, and then somebody either needs to do a peer review or a manager needs to approve it. So in this case, I have this tile, and that's a SharePoint site which has a sign of documents custom library on it. And over here you can see a test document. And when you click that test document or you select it, then the end user has the ability to see this automate button. And within that automate button, you should be able to see this custom approval flow, and which is called request manager approval. Also notice the request sign off. That's the one which is Microsoft providing. So to be clear, this is one which you get natively. So only that's more focused on random peer reviews. So I would definitely recommend the default one, request sign off, for peer review kind of use cases. But if you specifically need a line manager approval, then yeah, this probably is more interesting. So when you click on this, a panel should be shown with some questions around, do you want to trigger it? So here you see some details about the flow, and you get the option to actually specify why you need a sign off, and maybe if it's urgent or something like that. So I need a sign off urgently, and then you can basically run it. And then what happens, and hopefully I'm still signed in as the manager in this case, because in this case I'm logged in as Dennis and my manager is Jim, and Jim should be able to receive an action. So hopefully, if all goes well, we should be able to see that. So Jim will can also go to Microsoft Flow, and Microsoft Flow has, or sorry, Power Automate has an approval center. This is, by the way, one entry point. So approval, you can also receive email messages with approvals, so kind of lazy approval. But yeah, Jim can go to this approval center, and then he can see all the tasks where he's assigned to do approval. So in this case, this is the test document, and then he can click on it to see the details. He can also even go first to the document, because obviously you need to have a look at the document before you can approve it. And then if he's happy, then he can either approve it, reject it, or even reassign it. For instance, when he's, I don't know, on a holiday or something like that, and somebody else is attending for him or needs to do the approval. So in this case, I will approve it. Looks fine. And then you can confirm. So yeah, this is from an end user point of view, this is the process. And hopefully I still have enough time to show you guys the flow itself. Oh, by the way, the end user who requested it also gets a confirmation of that it's approved. And then when I go to my flows, so in this case, the approval flow request manager approval for a selected file. Then you can see the following things. Again, you have a trigger, which is a selected file. And then this section is the message. So yeah, we just request some additional input, like where you can add the urgency or those kind of things, but you also have other options. So you can also do like yes, no buttons, those kind of things. And then for that selected file, we're getting the properties. And after that, we're looking for the profile of the person who submitted that sign-off request, who is, and then we're looking for the manager, and then we're basically starting approval. And over here, you can see similar kind of approaches like with the other flows. So You can see things like the dynamic content from the name of the file, the message of the panel where we entered the data in the panel. And this email is basically the person who gets the approval assigned. So in this case, that will be Jim. And then over here in the next step, you will have a condition. So basically here it's waiting for the response. So it won't proceed unless this response condition has been met. Or sorry, unless the response has been submitted. And if this condition of approve has been met, then the approve email message will be sent. If it's rejected, then obviously he or she will get an email for that. So yeah, this is a real quick overview of this flow. I was going a bit more rapidly through this flow because basically this is a Microsoft template. So I adjusted it a bit, but basically this is all approval template. And I can also share that after the webinar with you guys if you want. But yeah, definitely have a look at this one because this example also contains a lot of examples of dynamic content, of using functions, of using input, all these kind of things, using other web services like the profile manager. So yeah, really useful. I see we only have 2 minutes, so are there any questions before I stop this, I end this session? I see Bio raised his hand. Sorry. Let me see if I can. Maybe Alice, can you help me with? Sorry, I'm not really familiar how I can unmute Bio or how I can answer the question. Bio, can you otherwise enter the question in the chat or maybe reach out to us afterwards? Let me see if I can unmute Bio. Bio, can you hear me?
Hello, yes, thank you. I couldn't even find the chat.
No, sorry, that doesn't matter. Me neither.
The question I had was that approval process.
Yeah.
Is it possible to have a global flow? Because say you have multiple sites, do you have to develop one per area, or can you build something like this that can be used across a lot of sites?
Yeah, that's a good question. No, to be clear, this is now on a site, a library-specific deployment. So yeah, unfortunately, you have to redeploy that on every library where it's needed. So no, at the moment, that's not possible. But yeah, I can understand what you mean. If it's because you're looking for for these processes on multiple locations within SharePoint or not.
Thank you.
Are you still there, Bio, or no?
Yes, I said thank you.
I
think
thank you. Okay.
It. Yeah.
Okay. Cheers. Okay. Any other questions? And otherwise, if you have additional questions, obviously, raise them after the session. Or did Bio still have a question? Because I'm seeing a raise a hand feature again. Oh no, I don't think so. Okay. Yeah, that was it. And thank you all for your time. Stay well and stay safe. And hopefully till next time.